All right, we'll come in session if you'd stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. If you'd remain standing for a moment of silence, please.
Let's take a moment to remember the 5 police officers and 11 firefighters that have died since our last board meeting.
Thank you. All right. We need to swear in a new board member.
Yes, if you'd like to, Mr. Chairman, I'd be honored to swear in Mr. McCarthy.
Okay.
Ceremonial swearing in. We've already taken care of this officially. Come on out around the way here. So, board, as you recall, I don't know if I'm. Jim, you got the volume on this thing? Not on. I don't know which one it is. Test 1, 2. No, I'm looking for the master down here. Test 1, 2, test. Board, as you recall, we had our board member appointed at the last month's meeting, and so here we are to officially, unofficially swear him. He's already been sworn in, already did all of his technicalities, but in a matter of public forum here, we're going to swear in Mr. Gene McCarthy. Please raise your right hand. I state your name.
I, Eugene McCarthy,
Do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
and the Constitution and laws of the state of Arizona,
and that I will bear truth, faith, and allegiance to the same,
and I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same.
and will defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
I will defend them against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
I will faithfully and impartially
I will faithfully and impartially
discharge the duties
discharge the duties
of the office of Sedona Fire District Board Member
of the office of the Sedona Fire District Board Member
of the Sedona Fire District
of the Sedona Fire District
according to the best of my ability,
according to the best of my ability.
so help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome. I guess you got your seat already.
Congratulations.
Okay, Chief, you got some folks to introduce?
Sure. I'd like to introduce 2 new staff members since our last board meeting. First, I'd like to introduce Heidi Robinson. She's the Administrative Services Manager. Shortly in the board report, you'll see the reorganization that's occurred and where she fits into the organization. But Heidi, as a person, comes to us after working at the Northern Arizona University for almost 16 years. She worked in event ticketing, customer service, and personnel management. In addition to her bachelor's degree in arts management, she has a background in fine and performing arts, having worked in museums, art galleries, and with venue management. Because of her familiarity with Sedona Fire District to members of the community, Heidi was inspired to use her collaboration skills, team building experience to support a respected and valuable organization serving the people of Sedona and its visitors. Involved in the community both in Sedona and Flagstaff, where she lives with her family, Heidi's volunteered with several organizations for fundraising and event planning, including the Flagstaff Unified School District, Pride in the Pines, Rotary International, and currently serves in the Flagstaff Symphony Orchestra as a board member. Certified as a student success coach and also trained as masterpiece art facilitator. Heidi enjoys working with students of all ages to watch them grow and enrich their lives through the arts. Heidi also loves science fairs, robotic competitions, and off-road trails in Sedona with her family, and tolerates camping for the good of the group through restaurants. Though restaurants and concerts are more her style. Kind of an indoor person, she says, and so she enjoys the seasons of Northern Arizona and certainly likes a good book by the fireplace. Her responsibilities are to oversee the majority of the administrative staff and work on projects as assigned by the chief and the board, actually, too. So we're honored to have Heidi join us. She's already been here a week and a half and already proving to be a good team member and a great add to the team. Staff members are really excited to have her part of the program, and so we're honored to have Heidi. Thank you for being here. Next up, we have a replacement for Tricia. This may not be the last time you see Tricia. There could be one more board meeting, maybe. We'll see. But here we have Carrie Tarver, who's going to be replacing most of Tricia's job functions. Carrie comes to us with over 25 years of office experience. Her medical experience began in the mental health field, where she had the opportunity to assist in obtaining Joint Commission accreditation of healthcare organizations, JCOs, you may have heard that term. From there, she entered the field of manufacturing life-saving medical products and enjoyed audits from the FDA as well as other European and Japanese governing agencies. And for the last 6 years, most importantly, she's worked in public safety and emergency medical services in Camp Verde at the fire department there, fire district there. And she's excited to join the Sedona Fire District and continue this journey in fire district world. Her background with Sedona Fire District actually began over 16 years ago, actually when her husband, Captain Jarrett Tarver, was hired as an operations firefighter, EMT, and recently promoted to captain. Over the years, she's gained knowledge of the Sedona community and the fire district. She's decided to join the team as her passion for helping people, and she also feels that she's got a lot to offer the district. It is her hope to continue the future successes of Sedona Fire District. In the meantime, she continues to continue her education. She's almost done with her associate's degree. And in her spare time, she continues to chase her dogs, herd her chickens, and juggle the children. Yeah, she juggle the children? Wow, impressive. Those got some big kids. Wow. Currently, she doesn't have a lot of time for recreational activities, but she eventually would like to travel all over, like Italy and France and Paris and London and Ireland, just to name a few places. And her role with SFD will be an administrative specialist too. She's learning much of the tasks that Tricia has performed, including those related to our governing board. However, her breadth and knowledge of experience in the fire district world, I believe she's going to be able to really offer up some other skills and talents in areas that she's already got expertise and exposure to working at the Copper Canyon Fire District. So we're honored and excited to have Carrie Tarver join us, and so thank you, Carrie, for joining. Tricia's excited.
I sure am.
All right, so we'll move into our budget workshop. I guess that's you, Gabe.
That's me. All right. All right, Mr. Chair, members of the board, we have been working since the last board meeting on the budget. And what I know you all have received your board budget books, and now we'll kind of take some time to go over kind of where we're at in the budget process, as well as how the expenses and revenues are lining up. So,
Does everybody have the most current version? I know there was a revision. So.
Okay.
Okay.
all right. So, kind of my objectives for today with the board is to overview the proposed 2018-2019 expenses, revenues, the capital funding and expenditure plan, as well as the future budget projections. So, starting off, the proposed FY 18-19 budget, we're looking at, based on current assumptions, salaries and wages of $8,497,000, with taxes and related payroll benefits of $4.6 million, administrative costs of $158,000, training and related of $209,000, professional services of $806,000, utilities and communication of $286,000, insurance of $111,000, repairs and maintenance of $301,000, and materials and supplies of $915,000. So, and then our debt service is $424,000, and that's for our Zoll cardiac monitors, as well as a gurney, and then in a station, and then finally the capital funding of $1 million for a total proposed budget as of today of $17,406,000. So as we kind of go in and explain some of the breakdown, starting on the personnel side, we did project in a COLA of 2% for all personnel, and that's based off of the Social Security indicators. Our pension costs have gone up slightly. PSPRS increased to 36.38%, which was an increase of 4.5% percentage points, which, as you remember from last year, for those board members that are here, it's much better than what we saw last year.
Later today, we'll talk about, in the board meeting, we'll talk about the 30-year amortization on PSPRS, and I'll explain how that can give us the ability in the future to control what we pay to PSPRS. ASRS went up slightly to 11.64%. We currently do not have our health insurance renewal rates in yet. I have seen from other clients and understanding that health insurance, what occurs for one fire district may not occur for the other, because it's really the rate increase not only depends on the market, but also depends on the underlying claims within that employee pool. So we are seeing around 3% for most of our other clients. I don't know what our usage was last year to be able to give any comparison from them to us, but right now we're going with 3%. We do have the trend neutralizer that on our health insurance. So over the last couple of years, we have seen significant savings on our health insurance costs. I feel the 3% is a good placeholder for right now until we get actual rates back from our insurance carrier. On workers' comp, we did get our experience modification in, and what that is that's the factor that the workers' comp company uses to charge a workers' comp rate based upon the actual usage of our workers' compensation. Our they call it the EMOD. Our EMOD did go up because of some significant workers' comp claims we had in the prior year. That's where this $95,000 projected increase is coming from, is taking our current workers' comp rate and applying that EMOD to it. However, we are shopping other workers' comp carriers. There's not a lot in Arizona. There's really only two, Copper Point and 7710. There is some high risk pools, which we're not even looking at that. But I have seen, again, with other clients, significant savings going to 7710. A lot of them have been with 7710 for a number of years. So while I did program in the $95,000 increase in workers' comp, I'm hoping by shopping 7710, we'll actually see either hopefully a break even on our workers' comp costs.
Back to health insurance for one
Yes.
second. Were we flat last year? It was either flat or it was very small.
We saw a
0.5% decrease.
0.5% decrease, yes.
Did we meet all our trend neutralizer goals for this year?
We met most of them.
Okay.
Last year we didn't met most of them.
Okay, so we may be looking at less than 3%.
Correct.
I wouldn't expect to see a surprise like 10.
No, right. Conservatively, I think we'll see 3%. I don't anticipate us seeing higher than that. I would like to see a decrease again like we did last year. But obviously, as we put this first budget out there, I want to make sure that we've captured all the increases that we could potentially see. And also, please, members of the board, do stop me as I'm going through here with any questions, okay? On operational expenses, as with every budget that I work on, and then this is now my second budget with Sedona, we try to start with, what are the organizational needs? What is our past performance, and what are our future needs? And so this year, just like every other year, we kind of started with going through the budget, going through our expenditures, historical spending, and seeing what our actual usage was and actual needs were. So again, we've built this budget again this year. By maintaining current services, there are some areas where you see we've seen a decrease, and I'm just going to kind of go through and highlight some of the changes. Yes.
When you say historically, how far back is that?
So I typically look at between 3 to 5 years. Some expense categories I'll look at 5 years, others I'll look at 3, and then some like personnel, for example, personnel costs, I base that purely off of what the cost is to fund those positions, but then for overtime usage, sick vacation usage, that I look at historical trending on. So going into our operational expenses on training and related, you'll see we did have an increase of $23,000, and that was mainly related. There was some kind of moving around of funds to fund other training projects, but the biggest reason we saw an increase there is we added more funding to our post-secondary education, which is the kind of the tuition reimbursement program that the district has. On professional services, we actually saw a decrease in that. If you remember a couple months ago, you did authorize the district to purchase Lexipol, which is the HR, the policy management software. So we did see a decrease because after the upstart costs on that, as well as there was some decrease in telecom and IT services. on the budget for next year. Repairs and maintenance did go up, mainly for facility maintenance and repairs. Our program manager in charge of facilities has noticed a few critical projects that are needed around some of our stations, and identified those, and we did increase repairs and maintenance budget by $85,000. And then another piece of that is just, again, back on our fleet, repairs and maintenance on fleet, based on what we've been spending for maintenance costs over the last couple of years. Finally, materials and supplies, that did go up $77,000, and that was related to a couple things: a records retention software that'll allow the district to maintain all of its records electronically and follow the state retention policies. We are continually trending over on our EMS supply usage, and so again, we did increase that budget line item, as well as fleet supplies is continuing to trend over, and so we've increased that one, as well as some fleet software, as well as included in that expenditure line. Some other expenses, as well as the board contingency. If you remember, last year I convinced you guys to reduce that board contingency line item down to $200,000. As of today, we have not utilized any of those funds. And my recommendation going forward was to always eliminate that contingency. And in this budget, I have eliminated that as our initial proposed budget to the board. And just kind of give the board some knowledge as to how we then handle unforeseen circumstances, because that's always what that contingency line item was established for. And I think that organizations, both in the private sector, public sector, at home, we have to have kind of an emergency fund. And historically, the board has relied on levying a contingency amount to cover that. By eliminating that, we're now not levying dollars we don't need, or may not need. And we've also grown our fund balance. And so after we allocate all of our funds at the end of this year, both for capital, both for carryover, we do have some carryover funds allocated this year, as well as the board policy on our reserve balance in our fund. We'll still have about 1.5 million in unrestricted fund balance. So if we do enter fiscal year 18-19, and we do have some unforeseen circumstance come up, like a catastrophic engine failure, and we've already exceeded our repairs and maintenance, or we're at our repairs and maintenance budget for fleet, we have the ability to bring a proposal before the board to authorize a purchase utilizing those funds. And so, again, instead of levying dollars and having a line item in our budget for contingency, we are building a budget based on what our needs are, and then we have, for lack of a better term, a savings account or an unrestricted balance that we can go to be able to cover those unforeseen circumstances.
Gabe, what was the figure of the contingency that we had in the budget originally?
Originally was 400,000. Last year we took it down to 200,000, and this year I'm proposing 0. Debt service, we did see a reduction in our debt service from last year of $55,000 roughly, and that was because one of our striker lease purchases was paid off this year, and so we won't have that going forward. One of the thoughts are, some just kind of from the board standpoint, if there's any other areas, additional savings, questions you'd like us to look at.
I have some questions, but I'm not sure what else you're going to say before I start asking. Do you have more to?
So I would like to, next thing I've got is our capital, then the revenue piece, and then kind of showing the projection.
Okay, yeah,
So
I want to talk about the revenue piece, so
Okay.
I'll get there when you.
yeah, so right now, any questions on kind of the expenditure side? Okay. So capital expenditure plan and funding for as we've been talking over the last couple of, well, I've only been here for a year and a half now, so I guess we've been talking for a year and a half of developing a comprehensive capital plan, and then instead of, levying the year for all those capital expenses, and then the next year, if we don't have as much capital expenses, drop in the levy, we set a plan, we adopt a plan, and we develop level funding for that plan. Now, I understand that in order to do that, that takes obviously initial funding, as well as you've got to put a plan into place. And so what we've done here is the administrative staff have gone through and identified all the capital needs for the district for the next 10 years. Actually 11 years, Chief. And I will point out that this plan has been modified significantly. There was a lot of items that understanding that we can't flip the switch on this plan today and go full board on this plan today. There were a lot of things that were pushed out and deferred, such as one of the station lease purchases. A Type 3 engine was pushed out. And the only piece I want to add to that is while we recognize that we can kind of defer and delay some of these items to allow more even funding and even flow of funds, there could be some unforeseen circumstances. Like, for example, with the Type 3, what I'm being told is from an operational standpoint, that engine or that truck can't go too far out of the district or even can stay within state or.
It's nearing the end of life.
Okay. So the concern we have is we may have a potential loss of wildland revenue if there's a deployment that requires the Type 3 and it's unavailable to go. But so there could be unforeseen circumstances by delaying these projects, but as we're developing the budget this year, we see kind of the benefit of the deferment outweighed the potential risks, but there are risks there, so.
Quick question for the chief. At the end of life, is that based on mileage, or is the cost of repair now at a point where it's above and beyond the value of the apparatus?
It's a combination of age, mileage, cost of repairs, and reliability. The vehicle has gone out a few times and has required maintenance
While it was there?
while it was out, and required maintenance again when it got back from the state to here. And it had been down for a couple months for maintenance issues. So it's just getting old. It's been used quite a bit. And it's the older style Type 3 models that used to be in the California system a long time ago that we bought new.
So, and is there value in it, in that if we do replace it, we would sell it, or?
There's a resale value
value.
to it, and it's just what the market will bear for that unit.
Thank you.
There's not six numbers in the resale. I think there might be 5,
Yeah.
maybe. So it's not a big resale.
Chief, with regard to the engine going out of district, when an engine goes out on a strike team, I would believe that you've already pre-identified maintenance areas if maintenance should have to occur while it's out. Is the condition of this particular engine such that you'd be very nervous about taking it out into the field, and where there might not be the kind of resource for repairs to be made? And secondly, the repairs that you've spoken of, were they significant?
So on the older units, I'm always concerned, not nervous, but concerned that there's going to be a failure of a system or a component on it down the road somewhere. In a lot of cases, when it goes to large incident team fires, there's a support service group there that can generally get it to a facility and or repair there for the minor stuff. And then in some remote areas, it is based upon getting it towed to a community to get it tended to that has a large heavy fleet facility. When we got the vehicle back this past year, we did have, I think it was a major drive or steerage system that went out on it that we had to get replaced on it. And it's usually that really sturdy stuff that goes out the last piece. And so we're having to replace the most durable components to it today, while the rest of it still kind of deals with life as it's been rode hard over the years.
Thank you, Chief.
So, and if I could just, so it's not a matter of that we have a piece of equipment that's dilapidated and about to fall apart. It's just that the reliability factor and the potential that by pushing it out 2 more years when we were going to replace it in this fiscal year, it creates potential opportunities that either don't go out because of the reliability of it, and the revenue that goes with it. It's just a give and take. It's still in service, it still works, it would be better keeping it close to home if we continue to see continued expensive repairs. That's the point of the story. It's just, and there's other items in there that become, pool vehicles that are 12 and 13 and 14 years old. Those could fail at some point if we push it out another 2 or 3 years, and we may find, hey, if we didn't make it to where we thought we could. And so that's kind of what we're just trying to say. I think Gabe's trying to say.
Locally, it's a really good engine. And I say really good because we got the mechanic who lived in town, and if it had a failure out on a fire off-road locally, we can get it into it and tend to it quickly and get it back up and running. Just the concern level increases when you take it out on the freeway. And it's a short wheelbase rig, and though it's just a really rough ride in the old chassis systems that used to be. And you have to be really attentive when you drive this thing because it's a short wheelbase ride, and it's a high profile rig.
Just lucky you don't have to ride the tailboard anymore.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so, had to pick up where I was. So this 11-year plan is got a few premises within it. So one thing that we've done historically is we've included debt service as a capital expense item. Going forward, debt service is going to be part of the operating fund, so to speak, the operational expenses, and not part of the capital expenditure plan. It's in here so you can see what the debt service is, but it's not part of the expenses that fall under capital funding or capital expenditures. So we start off with our current reserve, our current capital fund balance is at $363,000. At the end of this fiscal year, we'll ask the board to direct $2.5 million to the capital projects fund. From that standpoint, future operating budgets will be based upon adopting a capital funding dollar amount and then the capital expenditure plan as a secondary component of that. So going forward, for example, if we look at fiscal year 18-19, we're proposing a $1 million capital funding, but actual capital fund expenditures of $1,068,000, which includes some Station 3 repairs for AC and site rehab, an ambulance, some various telecom projects, radio infrastructure, portable radios, some phone system upgrades, some internet upgrades, as well as some equipment, fire equipment, hoses, a Hearst tool, and some finishing up on the EPCR upgrades that we've started this year. But again, what we're going to see, though, going forward is a operational budget or a budget funding mechanism of starting at $1 million for the first 2 years. Then we'll bring it up to $1,250,000 then the third year, the fourth year $1.4 million, and then finally in the fifth year of the plan, bringing it up to the full $1.5 million. If you remember back when we talked last month, our idea and our goal was to get that $1.5 million starting tomorrow. But given the kind of the constraint of starting up a plan of this caliber immediately after not having any plan in place prior, realized that it would be beneficial if we kind of slowly, gradually brought that funding mechanism up to where it needed to be from a go-forward standpoint.
So if I could add to that, not that we didn't have a plan before, it's we had a cash pay-as-you-go approach. The budget and the restrictions we had in trying to work in the budget and things like that, we were buying capital, and if we needed the $1,068,500, that's what we would have budgeted. We still had the funds in the unrestricted balances in the fire district coffers, if you will. But this is amortizing those costs over 10 years and creating a better flow, and we now are tracking better the balances in that capital plan at the end. So I just don't want to say that we didn't have a plan.
Right.
We've had a capital plan for, forever. I don't know how long we've had a capital plan. So we've had capital plan. It's just, this is a different funding mechanism a better approach to where we want to be and knowing that. And so I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
Right,
Some
yep.
people might think we weren't doing.
Funding
some of it.
plan, I should say, a new funding plan, not a new capital plan.
So Gabe, if I read this correctly, we're putting in a million, 1.25, and then so on and so forth down the road, but
Right,
we're also spending that money at the same time, so we're not
Correct.
always gonna get this balance to have this big cash pot at the end of the rainbow, because we're utilizing those funds as we go across based on the dark and bolded line.
right, and if you come down here to the bottom line, you'll see what that kind of cash balance is going to do in that fund.
Right.
As the monies go into it and are being projected expenses in those years. So, you know, at the end of fiscal year 18-19, that balance is gonna be at almost 2.8 million. But you'll see now at end of fiscal year 21-22, it's gonna be down to 1.4 million. And then gradually comes back up, and so that's gonna obviously ebb and flow with our expenses. But what we're not doing anymore is raising levy, lowering levy, raising levy, lowering levy, and having the levy impacted by that. We're neutralizing that demand on the levy and utilizing the fund the balance, the fund to make those expenditures and those purchases.
All right, thank you.
Okay.
I think on that, to note, at that 1.7 million at the end of 28-29, you know, this is only projecting the 11 years. Realize that each year that we go out, there's gonna be new capital expenses happening in all those cells you don't see that we haven't, you know, really programmed out, because it doesn't make much sense to go too far out. But knowing there are more engines, more station repairs, more, you know, whatever things that are gonna fit into that capital budget. So I just wanna be clear that having that budget or that balance that we're projecting is really important. And it also allows looking at those numbers, if something was to happen and an engine needed to be replaced earlier than we planned, there's bandwidth in there to be able to do those type of things in almost all, in all those years are really, our $800,000 is, you know, enough to cover an engine. So there's still a safety net, if you will, in the capital side of this equation versus the unrestricted funds that Gabe spoke to earlier in a catastrophic event. So it also helps protect us and know, as a board and as a staff, there's money there, and that's an important piece to realize, because 11 years is hard to predict the future, what's gonna look like, and what may or may not happen.
And one other thing actually, to kind of follow up what Chief just said on this being a plan and the ability to spend, if something's needed, have that fund balance. I think it's important to note this capital plan is that, it's a plan. And understand that each year, or I'm sorry, not even each year, but each time one of these items within this plan needs to be purchased, it's gonna be brought forward to the board. So you're not, with this budget, you're not authorizing the purchase of all these items. This is still gonna come as a piece-by-piece request, but this is the plan, so the board's aware, the public's aware that these are the planned capital expenditures, but by approving the budget, it doesn't automatically thereby approve those purchases. Those will be still taken to the board on a case-by-case basis as they come up for their scheduled replacement. Any questions on the capital side? All right. So the projected revenue for next year. So we're looking at, in order to fund the budget, $14,650,000 in property tax revenue. That'll be a proposed tax rate right now of $2.52. That's based on the growth we saw in our AV this past year of 5.31%, and obviously the increase in expenses. But we actually are going to see a decrease in our rate. Our current tax rate right now is $2.54. So we are seeing a decrease in the actual tax rate itself, but the levy will increase slightly.
Can you say that one more time? I just love to hear that. That decrease word.
So we are decreasing we are proposing a decrease in the tax rate, but the tax levy will still increase, but the rate will go down.
Then you'll explain as you're doing how that actually all works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the non-levy side, currently we've kept the same non-levy revenue as we've had last year of $2.2 million, and that's based on our current ambulance revenue, non-district fires, which is wildland deployments, telecommunication services and tower rentals and interest income. And actually just got some updated numbers today on the telecommunication side. So we will see an increase. I'll have updated revenue numbers for you at the next budget workshop. And we're also going to fine tune some other numbers. Right now, we're trending a little bit behind on our ambulance collection, I should say, and you'll see that in the financial report. So once we get some things worked through on there, and I've got a good idea of where we're at on that, I believe we'll actually be able to increase the projected ambulance revenue for next year as well. So we should still see some positives on the revenue side.
I think what's important on this particular slide is that although we're looking at a budget of, according to this document, 17.4 and change, the taxpayer, the public out in the community will be taxed at 14.6 million. So
Correct.
that difference, unfortunately, we can't publicize as though that's gonna be what our budget is, but that's what they're paying.
Correct.
The difference is coming from non-levy revenues,
Right. We have to budget for all of our expenses.
but the total number is what is projected out to the public.
Correct.
So, Board, I want to go back to the property tax piece. You know, the levy, that is what we levy, and the taxpayers that live in our fire district pay based upon their assessed value times, you know, the per 100 and all the formulas that go into it, and make up the 14.6 million. On your tax bill, you see a line item that's called FDAT, Fire District Assistance Tax. It is essentially the same thing as the school equalizer. So all the residents of Yavapai County pay the FDAT tax, and it's based upon a percentage value of their home. All of that money in Yavapai and Coconino, or all the counties, in each county, get pooled up into a pot of money, and then based upon a formula, which is essentially your budget, they divvy up the money in FDAT not to exceed $400,000. That tax, we receive much less money than our taxpayers actually pay. So when people see that, they add those two numbers up, and that is what they're paying for fire protection, but it really is an equalizer. We don't get all that money. There's a substantial amount of money, and I don't have my computer with me to remember the estimated number that the county kind of ballpark what our taxpayers pay and what we actually receive, but it's considerably less. So that helps smaller fire districts get some funding to help provide fire protection where they have very little resources to levy. Much like the school equalizer, each school, we all pay that equalizer. That money that we all pay here in Sedona does not go all to the Sedona School District. It goes to the entire state. FDAT goes to the entire county. So just it's not, we don't have anything to do with that tax. We don't have anything to do with anything in FDAT except the county sends us a check that's prorated based upon the different factors that they have, and a portion of that's paid by Sedona Fire District taxpayers. And actually, we pay more than we actually receive. And I just want to make that clear. It's very cloudy for some folks.
That's county by county though, individually.
Each county
Correct.
does it, each county
For their
collects
own
it,
county.
and they all have the same rules, no more than $400,000 per agency and all that stuff. And we go between two counties, and I'm not sure how it exactly works with the two-county thing. It gets a little challenging, to be honest with you. But we get about $325,000 a year
Yeah.
from FDAT, and the max is $400. We used to get $400 for many, many years, and then somehow it switched to $320-some thousand.
What usually happens is as some of the smaller districts within the counties increase their levy, their percentage share of FDAT gets greater, which then they only have so much FDAT funds for the entire county, that then the pie is now getting split between more people, or not more people, but larger dollars. So.
That makes sense?
So, Ty, I don't know if you want me to go to the kind of the summary slide, and then, because I know you
No,
said you had
let's
some
talk-
questions, or?
Let's talk about revenues for a second, because
Okay.
as you and I had discussed, you're keeping your revenues fairly conservative,
Correct.
and I kind of wanted to talk about that. So,
Okay.
for instance, Wildland, we're budgeting 55,000 of income.
Correct.
Can you tell, I know last year was 211?
205,000.
205.
Yes.
Can you tell me the bad year, the 33,000 year, that was 13?
13 or 14, I believe it was FY 13-14 was the.
So we've had 3 or 4 solid years of in excess of 100,000.
We have, and this year, you know, we're already trending to exceed obviously the 55,000 relatively, like by threefold. The concern I run into with wildland, budgeting for wildland revenue is that it's not guaranteed revenue. All it takes is a change in policy where we don't get a deployment, change in weather patterns where there's not a wildland season, and then now we've budgeted for revenue that we're not gonna get. We can, you know, I could spend some time kind of looking at a longer trend on what we've seen over on the wildland side, but I get a little concerned when we start increasing budgets on revenues that aren't guaranteed revenues, and so that's kind of where my concern comes on that piece.
So a good follow-up to that, Mr. Chairman, would be, you know, the EMS billing revenue, which might have been part of your next question, but, you know, we just got done waiting for the federal government to approve the super rural bonus that went away for a couple weeks and whatever, and weren't sure if it was gonna go. Now we just got that approved for 5 years. It's been a 2-year, and then a 2-year, and then maybe it's not gonna come back, and so now we know it's here for 5 years, so at least helps us plan. But when things like that are happening, you know, if we start planning for, you know, 2 million instead of 1.875, and then that policy would have fallen through mid-year like it was scheduled to do.
I
It
understand, but
It makes us challenged, like, oh, you know.
budgeting 25% of last year's revenue when there's no reason to think we're not going to see that revenue, or at least a significant amount of it.
Yeah.
That goes back to levying taxes on the thought that maybe you won't make that money. I don't like that. Especially if we're sitting on that fund balance, we're taking away the contingency because we've got a fund balance.
Right.
So I'm not saying you should project revenues at 200,000 for wildland, but I'm saying maybe 125 would be a more appropriate number. That reduces your budget by 75,000. For ambulance billing, I'd want to go back and look. Did you say we're at 1.9 this year?
No, that was last year. This year right now, like as I said, we're trending about 200,000 under where we should be, year to date on ambulance
But
revenue.
part of that's a collections issue. Because,
Right. So
um,
I need to dig into that a little bit more, but I think we can probably see ambulance around the 1.9.
I'd like to see a trend on ambulance revenue, given that we've seen interfacility transports go up, which are solid revenue. We've changed our pricing structure. We just raised our ambulance rates. I realize not everybody pays the posted rate, but there should be some increase in revenue based on that. I have some concern using such conservative numbers. I think we could
Right.
pad those a little bit to try and reduce what we're taxing.
Okay.
And Mr. Chairman, I think I heard you say if we increase the ambulance revenue $75,000, it would decrease the levy, not the budget.
The levy.
I think you said budget, just to make sure we're clear on that, be the
Right.
levy. I know it's what you meant, but.
Yeah, the amount we're levying, yes,
levy,
it would.
correct.
And we're basing it on an estimate of income. So, again, I just think there's room to adjust that a little bit. I
Perfect.
wouldn't suggest we use this year's numbers. I think there should be a cushion in there.
Right.
But
Okay.
a 75% cushion on wildland, I don't think we need that. I think and whatever the percentage is on ambulance revenue, again, I kind of want to see what the trend of the last 3 years is.
Right. All right, I'll do that. Anything else? So then, in kind of closing here, I've got the last year and then kind of summary going forward. And as you can see,
It's too small over there.
we're looking at this first blue actually the first column is the current fiscal year budget. The first blue column is the proposed 18-19 budget. You'll see and actually the data titles got cut off there. So I'll explain that as I go down here. So this first line, so up here is the assessed value for Coconino County, this very top line here. The next line down is the assessed value for Yavapai County, and then our total net assessed value.
What percentage multiplier are you using for AV?
So Right now, so this year we saw the 5% increase.
But I mean, across the board, what are you?
So across the board right here, so next year we're looking at 4,
Oh, there we go.
4, a decrease of 2.5, 3, and then 3 out. We have gotten all the data and compiled all the data for the economist to get us a report on an actual 10-year economist analysis on our AV. I hope to have that by the next board meeting and have that updated in these projections. So, and then here's the corresponding tax rate based on the budgeted expenses down here and the increases in assessed value. The first line is going to be the the Coconino tax revenue, and then this next line here is going to be the Yavapai County tax revenue for total tax levy of 13.6, 14.3 off the assessed value, and then down here's the other number for the FDAT, then followed by the number of our essentially non-levy revenues. And as we can see here, total revenues going from 16.89 in this year to 16.9, 17.9, and going up. Then this line right here represents our carryover fund balance that we've utilized in the past to balance the budget. And as I mentioned again when we first started here, that it's not good policy to always be relying on a surplus every year to fund your next year's budget. And so as we continue to work on getting that down, I recognize that's not something we can eliminate immediately. There needs to be a more gradual approach. We do have a surplus again that we're projecting this year. So I am looking at a $500,000 balance in here and then tapering that down to $250 next year and then $150 the following year. And then on the expense side, this first line on the expenses is salaries and benefits of 12.7 to 13.192, which is an increase of 3.7%. And then our other operating expenses actually decreasing from 2.8 million to 2.78 million. So not a huge decrease, but a decrease nonetheless. On the debt service before was included in this line in capital. Now it's separated out into its own line. And there's our debt service, as you can see, going across. And then our capital funding that I'd mentioned before in the capital plan. And then the percentage of increase in the budget year over year down here at the bottom based on the assumptions up here.
Gabe, can you explain what the debt service is?
Yeah, so the debt service is the lease purchase payments on, as I kind of mentioned it before, the ones we have in this budget year is the Zoll monitor, one of the fire stations, as well as a gurney. As we get to fiscal year 2021, we actually see those equipment lease purchase payments drop off, but then we look at adding a new station for a station remodel in those years. And then finally, again, after it's station 2 that we're currently paying on, when that drops off in 23-24, we look at adding station 6.
Station 6 is what's current?
Station 6, I'm sorry. And then looking at adding station 4 lease purchase in 23-24. And so, kind of again, as I mentioned before, in the deferment piece of that, we did defer some of those projects out to avoid, a greater impact to the budget.
What salary and benefit multiplier did you use?
5% in there.
5% a year?
Yes.
And this year, we're actually looking at
3.7.
3.7, so
Yeah.
again, in a ballpark figure going out, this year turned out to be 3.71.
What's the makeup of that 3.7? What does it consist of? Where's it coming from?
So that 3.7% is coming from a 2% cost of living increase. It's come across the board for all the employees. It's coming from a step increase for those employees that are eligible. It includes a workers' comp increase of $95,000, a 3% increase in health insurance benefits, a 1.5 percentage point increase in PSPRS, and a 0.2 percentage point increase in ASRS. And then obviously the associated Medicare tax on the wages. and other benefits, uniform allowance, so.
Thank you.
So as we continue to work through the next 30 days before the next budget workshop, I've got Ty's, direction to kind of dive into our non-operating or our non-levy revenues a little bit more. I will do that. Is there any other kind of direction, questions from the board at this point?
Ty, do you want to look at the COLA or anything, or, I mean, it's a 2%, do we have any flexibility in that?
Well, we have the flexibility of not giving it.
Well, I mean, can it be partial or
Can be anything the board decides.
up to the 2%?
What's the, 2% is that's the mandated, that's what the,
It's not mandated.
no, but how do we get that 2% number? That
That's the
comes-
Social Security.
That's Social Security.
Yes.
So through our MOU, we've agreed through the MOU that we will use the Social Security mechanism as our barometer for a consideration for COLA. And this year it happens to be 2%. So that's where we come up with that number. That's why we're talking about that number. But the COLA historically is at the board's discretion and discussion, and not a negotiated thing, so to speak. It's really just, here it is. How does it fit into that? And so leave it to your discussion.
And COLA affects everybody,
Correct.
whereas your step increases affect what percentage of members?
Oh,
Betty, do you know?
do you know?
Less than half, it's new.
Half, yeah.
Yeah, about,
I'd say.
The first 5 years.
so, yeah, so there's a 7-step process. So
Mhm.
for a new employee, they start out at step 1 and work their way through every year. So they start year 7, they're on their 7th step. If people get promoted, they end up on a scale somewhere and have a couple of years that they'd be getting step raises. So I bet it's half the department that's in a step of some capacity or another.
And just
So-
for the board's knowledge on the COLA piece, so like to place a value to it other than just 2%. The COLA with associated benefits is 270. The 2% COLA is $270,000. So of our 13,192,000, obviously a portion of that's the step increases, but the COLA accounts for $270,000 of that. Yes.
Educate me regarding COLA. What are our options?
Well, as Chief kind of mentioned, it's per the MOU, and I'm not going to get too far into the MOU stuff because I'm not involved with that. But it's the
wanna be?
board's discretion on the COLA. So the
So-
board, it's up to the board.
So the COLA typically is effective July 1st, or the first pay period in the July, however it's worded. I don't know if it's July 1 or the first full pay period in July. And in this case, it's 2%, and the board could decide to apply it as, last year was 0.3%. There's a 0.3, some confusion on that at one point.
Well,
So-
we've done something most years, but we've not, usually it's not the full 2%, if I recall correctly.
Well, it's a 2% varies by year. So Social Security last year was 0.3, and so the board elected to give the 0.3. I don't remember what the year before that was. There's been years where we haven't gotten a COLA. There's years where, the board, or past boards had frozen salaries, stopped step raises, done all kinds of things based upon whatever the needs are.
Well, I think we all need to study the budget and come up with our ideas, but yes, Dave, I think there's no reason that you couldn't entertain, maybe not doing it, but doing some portion of it, doing half a year of it,
Well, I think the thing that I'd like to address or concerns me is the fact that there isn't any one big ticket item in this whole book that is the answer to whatever we want to do. And it's a bunch of small little pieces in order to accomplish a budget that I think we all could be happy with. So I'd like to see perhaps a 1% COLA, and when you get to step raises, it doesn't affect everybody. It affects, well, either 50 members or 50% of the membership. So, if you were to split the step, and I think the steps are 5%, and so say where they were to get, the 2.5 this year and 2.5 next year on top of whatever step they may be getting next year. you know, is that an impact that will make a change? It's an impact that affects every member's wallet, but is it going in the right direction? And I don't know if that's.
So,
Well, 1% reduces your levy $135,000.
Right.
Correct.
Or you give the 2%, but you give it in January.
Right.
Or 1%, then 1% January, or whatever.
Or, yeah, or you do half a year, 1%, and then you escalate or you do 0.5%, a quarter, up to 2%. I mean, you can,
so the direction would help us understand. So you're absolutely right, Mr. Montgomery. You could do 1% at the beginning of the year, and that's it, 1% COLA. You could do 1% now, and that would be roughly $135,000 savings. You could do 1% now, and add the other percent in January. That would be about a $68,000 savings. You could do 2% in January. That would be a $135,000 savings. Round numbers, all this stuff is. Mr. Soto, your comment about going to 2.5% in the step raises, that's a completely different discussion. That isn't a meet and confer
Okay.
topic. That's not, I mean, it's a this is not a negotiated topic that we do in meet and confer. The salary and steps and things, well, you have the ultimate authority at the end, is a meet and confer topic and would not be appropriate to
discuss it.
negotiate right here in this meeting right
Gotcha.
now. So
Okay.
if that's a direction you wanted to go, you would need to let me know that, or the board.
Sure.
Some sort of, we'd go to another board meeting, and under contract negotiations, you could give me that direction, whatever that may be, as it relates to contract negotiations, and we would have that in executive session. We would take that back to the
Okay.
labor group, have that discussion, and work through that glorious process.
Point well taken. Thank you.
So you letting us know where you think that might be, if there is an interest to go. I love that number of 17.4, but I'd love a number that was even less than that. As Mr. Soto mentioned, we can buy less erasers or something and save, some number it doesn't even impact those numbers.
Right.
If we want to cut a service, if we want to not have any copy machines and no copy paper and no nothing, we'll save, $15,000, $20,000. I don't know what we're going to do, how to make copies of stuff, but we could make that happen. The programs we've tightened down a lot of things to get to this budget where we're at. We're happy to continue to cut. Just understand that we're talking about core services now.
Right.
And so giving us some direction, if no COLA was your direction, we're telling you that would cut about $270,000 off of that. If that's what you wanted and that's what you felt was important, that would come off of the levy. So the budget would go down by $270,000, the levy would drop by $270,000, and then any other number in between that, and you can, in round numbers, clearly cut that number in half by the 1% or the 2% halfway, or all those different ways you slice the pie, or one and again. You just give us some direction as to what you want, like.
I don't know, I'm not clear that we're gonna vote on that tonight.
No,
I
we
think
don't
everybody's
need to
gotta think
vote.
about that.
But we're looking for direction as to what Gabe can go back to the drawing board with to re-present, I guess, or.
Yeah, if you remember last year, I gave you, especially on I think one of the big hot buttons last year was the board contingency. And I was able to, with this direction, come back to the next workshop and have, okay, here's option A, here's option B, and then you can see what that impact was, for today and the future impact. So if that's the direction, I could use some guidance on if we want to see some of these scenarios.
I think I'd like to see some of these scenarios of a 1% and a 2%. We see the 2%, so
Right.
we only need to see the 1.
And perhaps defer it to January if that's possible.
Does that,
Defer 1% to January, or 2% to defer to January? Okay.
That's
Essentially the same impact, dollar amount, just cash flow wise, it just is impacted.
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
So does this budget get us to where we wanted to be in 10 years with what was asked for in the bond? Have we covered?
No.
Okay.
This budget does not get us all the items that were in the bond. There's definitely deferments, there's definitely timing of items, and there's actually deletion of items. There's no maintenance facility at all planned in any of that capital process there. That's off the top of my head. It does not get everything, and it definitely pushes it out much further in time than it would have had the bond passed.
But it does get us the 2 stations, it gives us some of the major primary issues, which are the stations are huge. We have to do something about 5. What's our time frame on that? We've got another.
We have more time than we initially discussed. The initial thought there was a 2 or 3 year window. It's actually longer than that. The lease has got a longer term than initially discussed. So I think we talked about that at a board meeting at one time. I don't have the exact date, but it's not 2 years from now. It's longer. It's closer to 10 that we have an actual lease dialed in that we control, so to speak. It's just a matter of that station and the functionality of it and all the reasons that the state parks are interested in moving forward sooner than later, and having the stars align in that environment is where it really should be, moving it north. And so the sooner we can make that happen and put all the pieces together, we're still working on ADOTs, right-of-ways, and all kinds of different things to make that happen. But if we're programmed out now, not for this budget year, but for next budget year to do that, I'm trying to remember, or is it we defer it 2 more years? I can't remember.
We've got that programmed in for, 1920, Station 5.
So 1920, so
So next
not this
budget year.
budget year, but the following budget year is when we'd have our first lease payments due for station number 5. And then in 2024
23, 24 would be
would be
Station
when
4.
Station 4 would be on the books to be done.
Well, this is, having been through a few of these, when you got here, one of the things that you said was we wanted to try and build a sustainable 3 to 4% growth, manage expenses. You know, here we are with, first pass, it's a 2.4% increase. I'm okay with that. We're a little higher than 3 to 4% every year, but that's taking care of the majority of things that are critical. The stations, rolling stock, infrastructure. I think it's a pretty good trade-off.
Correct, and knowing when I said that, you know, not necessarily, I mean, I guess I didn't say, hey, this is good, this promise is good for a couple of years, you know, I mean.
Oh, no, yeah, I heard you say it.
I'm sure there was a warranty deed somewhere in there. The reality is that here's where things are at now, and here's what we know today, and it is what it is. But knowing that this is, you know, we're tight in here as far as where things are at, and, you know, we're talking about replacing pool vehicles that are 15 years old. Like, I mean, back to your question, is it mileage, is it age? I mean, you take a Ford or a Chevy Suburban and drive it for 15 years up and down these streets and inspections and off and on. I mean, the car's tired after 15 years. It needs to be replaced. You know, a fire engine that turns up and fires up and goes. These aren't pristine vehicles that have had no use that we're just buying because it'd be nice to buy a new one. You know, our personal lives, if you have the means to buy a new car every 2 or 3 years because you like a new car, that's how you live your life. That's not how we're living the fire district here. These are timed replacements of vehicles that we look at. You know, we're buying, in the budget here, some software to manage fleet. And through our volunteer and our mechanic are looking and gonna be able to track much better our reliability, our cost, and being able to gauge where those two intersect and going, hey, this vehicle makes the most sense to get rid of it here and be more scientific based than historic based and things like that. And we may find, hey, that truck we thought was good for till this year, it's got 2 more years based upon the math and the science of this new tracking software. We'll move it out then if that's what we need to do. And this one actually is costing us more than we realize. We should really get rid of it a year early. We're gonna find those things out throughout this process.
Quick question for you, Chief. And using the Type 3 engine as an example, saying its value for a brand new one is $500,000, as an example, hypothetical. Does this document reflect that we're budgeting, you know, $175,000 this year and $175,000 next year, and then, you know, the difference was, you know, save the previous year, so now it's time to buy? Or are we just saying, hey, we need it, let's budget for it and let's do it?
So absolutely, with that million, you know, $1.25 million, $1.4 million, $1.5 million going out, essentially we're amortizing all of those costs. You know, so we looked at that and said, hey, there's, you know, when it was 1.5 across that we talked about, there was $15 million worth of resources that we need to purchase, plus that balance we wanted to maintain at the end, so wherever that all comes out to be. So we're essentially buying 1/10 of the vehicle each year, you know, by that cost share over 10 years. Just that we buy this one this year and that one this year,
Right.
and that type of thing. different than the cash pay where we, pay as you go, where we just said, hey, we need a fire truck this year. Let's budget $600,000 for a new engine, go forth and plug it in the budget. Oh, and we need an ambulance, and we need 2 pool vehicles, and we need some repairs on the station, and now this expense is 1.8 million this year. Next year it's 800, whatever, and you got this ping
Yeah.
pong ball going. This balances all that out, as Gabe mentioned, very well, and shares that cost.
Thank you.
All right.
Any
What-
other questions for
Any
Gabe?
other questions? All right, but just recap real quick where we're at on the process. So we're obviously at this workshop on the 21st. From now through May, we're just gonna be meeting with vendors, getting the last bit of quotes on mainly our insurance. And then we'll come back in April and present another workshop at that April meeting. Ideally, we would like to have a plan in place to solidify a budget that we can bring forward in May for tentative adoption. We'll post for 20 days after that tentative adoption in May. And in June, we'll hold a public hearing on the budget and ask for final adoption of the 18-19 budget. All right. With that, we've already got our directions unless there's anything else and questions. Good. Okay.
All right, thanks, Gabe.
Thank you.
Want to take 5 minutes? Let's take 5 minutes.
You're the chair.